Thank you very much, and thank you so much for this invitation. It may seem a jump to go from the history of the last 100 years, very specific to this place and its history, and then to look at something that's a global agenda and which is all about the future, about the practice we need to create. But actually, and I hope that this will be evident through the presentation, it will be very linked, because what we... Sorry?
Not working.
Yeah? It's not working.
This one is working, this one is not
Okay,
working.
then maybe I get rid of this one?
Probably
Is that
yes.
okay? Yeah. So then we just do a little bit more technical stuff, because it's then it's nicer not to have two. Just do it. Let's see if I can untangle. But this one is working, so that's perfect. So should I begin from the beginning? Yeah, okay. Hopefully now we both have sound and images. So thank you. And thank you so much for this invitation to come here today. I'm really pleased to be here. It may seem a little bit of a jump because we have just heard about the history of the last 100 years, very specific to this place and its culture. And now I'm going to talk about something that's a global agenda and something that points to the future, the practice of architecture we need in the future. But I hope that through the presentation you will find that the two is actually very linked, that the practice we need in the future, one that's more sustainable both in a humane and environmental ways, is closely linked to the specifics of the place, to the specifics of the architectural project, and to the culture and the history we bring to this new practice. So hopefully it will come together. As was said in the presentation, my name is Natalie Mossin, and I'm a head of institute at the Royal Danish Academy. So there's also that link, the link between the Nordics and the Baltics. We have a long history of sharing information and inspiration in architecture. I'm pleased to be here today and hope that this can continue. So first of all, back in 2015, all the world's nations managed to agree on 17 sustainable development goals. Already today it seems like a small miracle that the world could agree on something so ambitious as 17 goals that we need to reach together as one world to make a world that's better for both for the planetary health and for each and every person living on this planet. So those 17 goals, they are quite unique, they're special, they're different from the other big initiatives the UN has brought into the world because they combine a complexity of issues. So this is not just green goals or red goals, humanitarian goals. This is the complexity of all the challenges we face together, the 17 goals, starting with no poverty, and as Ruta mentioned, moving all the way through a number of core issues that we need to address as one world. The goals seem in a sense unreachable. They were decided by heads of states. They are so ambitious, no poverty for the whole world, how can we even begin to get there? That many architects maybe feel that this is something where we have to wait for politics, we have to wait for other actors to do something about it. But in truth, to reach those agendas, the starting point is that we agree that we have something we need to do, that we have that vision, the goal of the goals, and then to look at our own practice and find out how it relates. And the message here today is that when we look at built projects, when we look at architecture and the built environment, certainly architecture and the built environment is part of the challenges we face today, part of what creates an impact on the environment through CO2 footprint, through waste production, through energy consumption, and also part of how inequalities are constructed in our societies. But certainly architecture can be part of the solution to an even higher degree and contribute to create societies and built environments, projects, parks, settlements and cities that are good for the environment and for people, and to in some way, small ways and big ways, contribute to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Closer? So how many of the rows did actually hear anything? Oh, that's good. We wait for another one. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. So this is all the way up here. If it's too loud, then you have to say as well. So basically, what I'll try to do is we mapped build projects, because one thing is to illustrate how to make an impact through ideas and visions. That's important as well. But it's also to make tangible how we can contribute. It's really interesting to look at what is already built. That makes it specific, it makes it local, it makes it real for users that we can contribute to architecture. And actually that's a great force of persuasion also when we talk to clients, when we talk to politicians, because there is a certain magic in the architectural project that it can make real a vision of who we want to be and where we want to go. And we saw that also in the previous presentation, illustrating how that has been expressed in architecture over the last 100 years. So in working with this project of demonstrating and illustrating architecture's contribution, we looked at projects from all over the world, and that's what you see on this world map. And then we found all these projects. Each of them have a contribution. They're not the final contributions, they're not the only contributions, but they're examples of contributions. To make it real, that certainly we can do something through architecture, but also to start a conversation among you and your contractors, among you and your clients, with authorities and so on how they can aid that transformation. And I'll get back to that because, as some of you may know, the 17th goal, the final goal, is partnership for the goals. And then I'll go through all 17 of the goals, because that's maybe the best way to actually get a feel of them. And I'll try to do it fairly quickly so that you'll also get to the next lecture and lunch today. So for each of the goals, I'll just briefly introduce the goal, how it relates to architecture, and then just a simple example of a contribution. And as I said, there can be many more, there can be many different, but a specific project is then a starting point to discuss what is the contribution we want. So no poverty. There's a reason that that's goal number one. It's a huge challenge all over the world. And the challenge of poverty is really interfering in a way, or interacting with so many other of our agendas, and certainly having a big impact on those affected by poverty. Architecture in itself cannot lift people out of poverty, but the built environment can affect the impact of poverty on people's lives by providing access to affordable housing, sanitation, educational institutions, health facilities, and spaces for recreation. Through architecture, we can give dignity and a space to live from to people, and that can make all the difference as a starting point. The example here is the Empowerment Shack housing project by the Urban Think Tank in South Africa. And please, you can, the books where all these examples are put together are free to download. They're open source, so you can read more, and you can, of course, also go into, there's a lot of publications on this specific project and also on some of the others, so you can, after this lecture, if you get inspired, you can go and find more in this. So I'll just present each project very briefly, not up to what it deserves. But in this case here, this is an example of trying to do something for some of the many people that live in informal housing, that have no access to quality housing and no rights to live where they live. So this project combines an architecture that's open source and that can be scaled up by sharing. It combines legal tools to help pathways to ownership and rights to the land, and it provides infrastructure for sanitation, for fire access, very basic things that means a lot to the dignity and quality of life. The architectural design is very simple. The plots are divided by these firewalls, and then you can, from the basic architecture created by Urban Think Tank, you can then continue to build on the project as your family grow, your situation grow, and maybe your resources change as well. But one thing to take from this project is the idea that it's open source, that there's an impact on specific lives here, but there's a potential of reaching bigger impact by making the ideas, by making the framework open source. Then zero hunger. To end hunger and to achieve food security. It's a big problem, and it's one, as you all know, that's gaining even bigger relevance over these last few months, where we see new, very, very big threats to food security all over the world. And the built environment can contribute, because when we plan, when we do landscaping, and when we build, we can protect existing ecosystems, and we can also prioritize the preservation and expansions of area for food production. That's even in dense cities, because you don't need a lot to actually supplement your food security through the ability to grow a supplement or additional sources of food. And the example here is very humble. It's from the refugee camps of Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where it's one of the world's biggest refugee camps for the Rohingyas. They are placed in very cramped quarters. The gates are closed. They cannot go outside to the surrounding society. And the only source of food was the dried food that's delivered through the UN as emergency food supplies. These micro gardens are very humble. They're extremely small, but they provide a population that came from farming communities a chance to use their skills. It provides better nutrition through the greenness that can be grown, and actually they even managed to make these gardens grow up to the roofs of these tent structures, which is a benefit for the indoor climate in a very hot climate. So through something that's an architectural and landscape architectural intervention of a very, very small, very humble scale, there's actually a big impact on quality of life and on nutritional health for these people. And then, of course, there are many other examples of urban farming in dense cities and roof gardening and many other wonderful initiatives. In France, Paris, a number of unused parking facilities underground have been used for mushroom production. So the possibilities are great if you think about them in an architectural and landscape architectural way when you develop and refurbish existing areas. Goal number 3 is good health and well-being, to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. This is, of course, something that's deeply connected to architecture, and I think we all know that. It may have been forgotten a little bit in the years leading up to the pandemic, because we had so efficiently separated health into something that happened in hospitals and forgot about the deep impact that our homes and our living environments have on health. But we spend most of our days inside, and how we design those buildings, how that indoor climate is, means a great deal. In the example here from Tanzania, the Star Homes project, which is a research project combining doctors and architects, the architecture itself of the building is used to tackle the 3 main reasons for childhood illness, which are dengue-borne diseases like the malaria, it's infections caused by bad sanitation, and then it's diseases of the airways, of the lungs, through cooking indoors. And this simple design includes a number of design parameters, among them raising the sleeping level to above the mosquito, where the mosquitoes fly, creating better cross-ventilation. Again, also, I'll not go into details, but affecting how the mosquitoes are drawn to their subjects. Taking the smoke of a very simple stove concept to the outside of the house and creating a simple, easier to keep a clean bathroom facility. So these are simple design tools built into the architecture and an alternative to a way of thinking about health that's driven by a medical thinking, sort of finding the pill. This is not about finding the right pill or the right vaccination. It's about building into architecture the the conditions of a healthy life. And it matters greatly already and will matter even more in the future. Then, of course, there's quality education. Schools and educational spaces are a crucial part of our investment in the future. And how we create that opportunity to access education, how we create that future for our children is also defining for our societies. The example here is a school in Denmark. It's from a new neighborhood built in a previous industrial area. And to create a school in that kind of new residential area is how you create also a community. It's a place, it anchors people to the place, it's a place to meet. And this school is kept open so that the roofs, and as you can see, the sort of outdoors is one big public space also after hours, so that it could be used as a community center. It can be used to help build up identity and create a focal point for this new neighborhood. Then moving to gender equality. How we build can make it, can help to include or exclude people across gender lines. It's of course, it can be women. In the UN definition of this goal, there's a strong focus on the mortality of mothers and infants by lack of access to maternity clinics. But it's also everywhere in our built environment how we either exclude or include both men and women, but also people who with all other gender identities. And the case here, the example here, is on this core part of how the UN define it, which is a Women's Opportunity Center in Rwanda. It's Rwanda had a devastating civil war that depleted especially the male population, and to rebuild the country, Rwanda has really moved to the forefront of a gender equal country, building up actively women's skills, their rights and opportunities to own businesses, but also their space in politics, so that now, looking at Rwanda, you have a truly modern country. It's on the basis of a disaster, of a big crisis, but it has been transformed by the women and men of Rwanda into an opportunity to build back better. Then we have clean water and sanitation. Adequate treatment and disposal of sewage, access to clean drinking water and access to hand washing and cleaning are crucial to human health and to stopping the spread of bacteria and viruses. I think nobody can have lived through the last couple of years without realizing that. And I'm sometimes joking that what you see here, which is a bathroom facility, this is the star architect of the future. People who are able to transform these basic needs into elegant architecture. The practice here, the small architectural company in Vietnam, are both working on commercial projects, and then they do pro bono projects. This is one of their pro bono projects where they have built a very, it's a project at a low cost. The building time was very brief, and it provides a huge lift for the staff and students of a school in rural Vietnam that had no bathroom facilities. Having no bathroom facilities is a big problem. It's a problem for the health of students and staff, but it's also an environmental problem because you have solid waste going into the to the natural area. By providing this very simple architectural intervention, you make a lift both for the environmental concerns, for humane concerns, and in this case, despite the very, very small budget and the short building time, you also create something that actually has an architectural value. And I think that's both amazing and inspiring that it's possible to do, and that is possible to do for young practice with no specific means in Vietnam. Then to goal number 17, affordable and clean energy. I think all of you understand and know very well and work already very well with this specific goal, that the built environment is a major source of energy consumption, and we have to think all the way through from how we procure materials through the lifetime of the building and to how we dispose of it when we think about energy consumption and the future of affordable and clean energy. Of course, the buildings can also assist by the production of energy on the building, but a major step towards affordable and clean energy can be done simply by looking at how we reduce unnecessary energy consumption in the full life cycle of buildings and architecture. And the example here is a beautiful school by Carré Architects in Burkina Faso that works in a very hot climate with natural ventilation, so managed to do basic important functions of the building design for the benefit of its users without using additional energy. So moving fast here through, because we have 17 of these goals, we get to goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. So of course we also need a built environment that can contribute to decent work and economic growth, both on a planning level and on a building level. This has of course an internal aspect about the building industry itself, but it also has an aspect about people's ability to move through a safe public space, through affordable transit routes to workplaces, and in that way to be able to even go looking for employment. And the example here is a fairly advanced version of a contribution to the goal. It's a surgical facility in Uganda, and this hospital is linked digitally with the renowned Sinai Hospital in New York, so that the surgeons can have live mentoring by experts during surgery, the kind of training that you normally have to do in person, and that would be impossible to reach for a surgical facility in Uganda, very far from any sort of big urban infrastructure. But here it's possible to make the knowledge global while the impact is local, because the patients of course stay here in Uganda. And I think that way of thinking, that we think of knowledge as something that's global and that we can share and transfer across the globe, but think about the building, its impacts, its users, its material as local. So to try to continue to be global, but be global in the right way, be global in the knowledge sharing, and not require, say, patients to travel many hours to a capital city to be able to get qualified surgical help, and then they may not be able to afford or access that kind of solution. And then industry, innovation and infrastructure. And here the infrastructure is not about roads, it's about the industrial infrastructure. Do we have the material production? Do we have the industry we need locally? So for the UN, this is very much about places in the world that does not have an industry locally, and thus have to, say, import bricks from Germany rather than have them locally produced. So for the building industry, this is very much about thinking about local resource, but also thinking about building up the expertise and the industry to take raw material, to take what's available locally and transform it into the high-end products we need in the building industry. And of course, along the way, to also, together with architects, create the innovation in the products and elements for the building industry, so that they become greener, less energy reliant, and less waste producing. The example here is a fantastic project from Congo by Mars Architects, where, because this place is so removed that you can't even bring anything there, they had to start the project by thinking about how to build up craft, how to build up a production of building components locally, because you couldn't get them there anyways. So again, the knowledge was global and came to Lima, but then a big part of the project was to build up skills, to build up production of components in this local area, and that can then be scaled up and used for many other projects as well. And then we get to goal number 10, reduced inequalities. Catherine Richardson, who are one of the scientists tasked by the UN to report on the condition of the globe, on where we are on all these challenges, has said that really this is the most difficult of the goals. We have solutions to the rest if we're willing to implement them, but reduced inequalities, that's going to be the difficult one to crack. And of course, that's very much political. There's a lot of humane reasons for that. But through the built environment, we can either act as an amplifier, an enforcer of inequalities, or we can reduce inequalities by prioritizing designs that ensures inclusion and accessibility for all, including for citizens that are marginalized, at risk, or living with a disability. And the example here is a farming kindergarten in Vietnam. The idea here is that the women are able to seek work because their kids get a proper quality offer to attend this farming kindergarten, which also interacts with these other goals of no hunger by having a focus on understanding how to grow, produce, and use local vegetables and fruits. And then we get to goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities. This is the goals. If you have, some of you have looked at the goals, this is probably the goals that you feel most at home. A lot of architects feel most at home here because this is a goal that directly mentions architecture. We know that we have a big task in creating sustainable cities and communities. Because the way we build, design, and plan our cities and communities can truly mean a lot in how inclusive, safe, healthy, resilient, and environmentally sustainable they are. And an example here is an artist residency and cultural center in Senegal, because part of what makes communities resilient is that we also create the cultural facilities, the meeting points where identity and belonging can be reconfirmed and can be felt in our cities and communities. And I think this city and this year will understand that very well. Goal number 12 is responsible consumption and production. Of course, again, it's very easy to understand that we in the building industry have a big role to play here. A lot of the products we receive on the building side have in them an element of production for waste, because we cut the gypsum board, we cut the wood, and from a log of wood is taken down in the forest, and until we walk on a floor in a house, so much of that log has been lost. First in the production of the boards, then on the building sites when we cut them to what we need. And ways of thinking about a fuller use of our resources, which is something we knew historically as architects how to do, is crucial for a more sustainable future. And that of course includes also what then happens when we take up that wood board. How do we use it in its next application? Is it going to waste? Is it being burned? Or can we use it again in some other way? And the example here is from Spain. It's a fantastic housing project that both experiment with local organic materials that have for a period been an industrial period of time been little used, like seaweed, but also reclaims and reuses elements of buildings that are being demolished. And then goal number 13, climate action. The CO2 footprint of the built environment is very, very big. And it's something we need to reduce, both in existing buildings and settlements and in the new projects and the new activities we carry on from now on and forward. So this is of course something we can achieve by looking at the materials we choose. We can look at the energy sort of the energy consumption needed for what we build, for how we plan bigger structures. It's about how we transport building materials, how much we carry from the other end of the world, how much locally produced we are able to use. It's about renewable materials. It's about biomaterials when you are in a context that have rich biosources. And it's of course also about building in a way that's resilient for the climate changes that we do see, so that what we build now and how we renovate now will also help the built environment and those that use each and every building to handle the changes in rainfalls, in heat, and so on. And the example here is the Minghu Wetland Park in China. That's an area that combines the handling of excess cloudburst with creating a nature network, giving habitats to to insects, to plants, and as a co-benefit create a green environment that both gives quality of life for citizens and also help increase the knowledge of the natural environment for children. Because a lot of the children that grow up in dense urban areas today know very little about how to interact with nature. It becomes something that's very remote, and to preserve something we also need some understanding of it, some exposure to what is an ecosystem. How do what does a natural system between the waterfall, the connection to plants and nature and so on, how does it even function? And now we move to goal number 14, life below water. And of course, most of what we build is built on land. But how we build affects the oceans. It does so in several ways. A big component is of course the waste we lead into to rivers and oceans. It's both direct and secondary, but it's also of course the transportations across the oceans, all the containers of heavy materials that we ship across the world. We can think about that, and we can think about also things like single-use plastic to wrap building components. They are one of the sources of waste that we know end up in oceans. But a big impact on buildings is to think about how do we handle waste? How do we ensure it does not get into the drinking water or into the water bodies of this world? And the example here is a fairly interesting project that's trying to remedy the fact in Australia that man-built structures are built flush and in such a way that there are no habitats for the creatures of the sea. There's nothing for the plants to hang on to, and there's nowhere for the sea creatures to live. So it's trying to do things in a different way that say, okay, we are still building here, but we're also retaining the possibility for habitats for a natural life. And then life on land. So yes, we build mostly on land, and the structures, buildings, settlements, cities, or roads and so on take up a rapidly expanding amount of land all over the globes, and ecosystems are under intense pressure. So when we build, we have to be very careful to protect, restore and support ecosystems and biodiversities. And that means, as you just saw in that on that ocean front, that also when we're on land, buildings and settlements must include habitats for plants, insects and animals. In Denmark, where this has been a quite successful movement for a while in our landscape architecture, we have better biodiversity, better nature networks in cities than in the farming land of Denmark. And that's of course because the farmers are very interested in keeping away insects and anything that can reduce the yield of the growth. But if you have barren cities and industrialized farming, there's no room left for a richness of natural life, and we need those corridors, we need those nature networks to function, and they have to function throughout both urban and rural areas. And the example here is from Switzerland, where what you see that looks like a road in the middle is one of the many 20th century's intervention to create more and better farmland, the straightening out, creating canals where there before was sort of natural water bodies. And now we see a movement going the other way to recreate the natural systems, because the canals took away the wildlife and the habitats for animals, and we need those back. And here you have the added benefit of creating a green area that's recreational for the people of this area. Now we are almost at the end. We are getting to peace, justice, and strong institutions, and I think for many of us, this is a goal that's we have to think about so much these days. It's a moment in time where peace, justice, and strong institutions are under pressure or breaking down so many places that we have to think about acting towards this goal. And of course, main actors here are governments, but we can also help reinforce a sense of justice to reinforce strong institutions by creating the both the parliaments and courthouses and civic institutions like public libraries, but also more humbly the local community centers, the places for worship or memorial, anywhere where we as citizens can come together and express our feeling of justice and what we want to create an inclusive and compassionate society. So I think this is really a goal to engage with. We need that for all the other goals to succeed. There's nothing as armed conflict that take away from all of these goals. Nothing is possible if we don't have peace. This example here is from the United States. It's it's a building that helps the American society remember and address a history of racial injustice. Each of these pillars represent a district in the United States where people were lynched, and the names of the people that were lynched. And of course there were probably more people lynched than what's recorded, but these are the recorded lynchings. So you have a deeply moving architectural route that you walk through under these columns and feel the weight of history. But then you also have a lawn where a twin of each of these columns is laid down. And when the counties are ready, they can reclaim their pillar and take it back to their county and place it in a place where people locally can confront that memory and discuss how to address it today. So over time, that lawn will slowly change with fewer and fewer columns, and it will also become a conversation about what parts of the country are still not able to join this conversation and why. So it's a political piece of architecture, but it's also, for the context of the United States, a necessary act of memorial and the future storytelling. And then to the final goal, partnerships for the goals. And this is such a beautiful goal, because when the heads of states back in 2015 agreed on the 2030 agenda, agreed on the 17 goals, by creating the 17 goals as partnerships for the goals, they address that they, as heads of states, cannot reach these goals alone, that partnerships are needed, that we need every profession, every individual, civil society, companies, young and old, to engage in this agenda for a more just world if it's to succeed. And as architects and as professionals, we have a great potential for doing that. Because through architecture, we can make that future tangible. We can make it relevant locally, and we can show both users, politicians, society around us what that future might look like. It's a difficult act for many professions to imagine that, but it's something that we do every day through our work. And the example here is a project in Sri Lanka. Siguriban architects, back when there was the earthquakes in Japan, formed a non-profit to help to create architectural responses fast for areas of disaster, because having a dignified home is a core piece of rebuilding society. Siguriban understood that intuitively as an architect, and through this foundation that is still run by him, but collaborating with many partners, a long number of emergency housing projects have been created. But these are not makeshift tents that only last for a while. These are fast and cheap, but dignified homes that can stand there for a lifetime, a building's lifetime, and help as a basis for the re-establishment of society after disaster. But to sort of move out of all these, the run through all 17 goals, there's a lot of detail and context, and this is of course a very fast running through. But key findings when we look across all the cases we found is that through architecture, not in every project, not everything at once, but yes, there is an interaction, there is a possible contribution to all 17 goals, and that as architects we can reach for the goals, regardless of where we're from, where we work in the industry, and what budget we're working on. Again, when you have a project, it has a timeline, it has a client with specific demands, you are interacting with local laws and regulations that maybe do not allow, say, for reuse of a certain material. There's a lot of conditions, and they can make us feel, well, then I can't do anything at all. I have to wait until the government creates some better building codes, then I can do something. Or I have to wait until my client says I'm going to invest more in this. Then we can do it. But really, it's possible to do something. Maybe not all at once, but something is possible to do within every project. Maybe it's a little better access for the disabled. Maybe it's a slightly better performance on energy. Maybe it's the choice of a local material that was not your first choice if you hadn't taken a moment to think about what can this project contribute. But in every project there's a possibility to think about all of these parameters and consider, is there somewhere within this project where it would enhance the architecture, enhance the use for users, and create better conditions for environmental sustainability if I try to reach a little bit towards making a contribution to the goals. And then, of course, that to reach all 17 goals, you need those other people. So part of this is also to build a culture, to make it visible for others in the industry, in society, that we can do things that are humanely and environmentally sustainable, and to inspire through the projects to move in that direction. Because we need all those other actors. We need that companionship and the support from everybody else in the industry and beyond. Then I think the time is up, so I'll not say a lot, but just to, about this final slide. But just to say that when the UN decided on the 17 goals, they also decided on an overarching value that leave no one behind. So that is the transformative promise of what if we actually get where we want to be with the 17 goals, that this is then the promise that no one is left behind, and the strategy towards that is to reach the furthest behind first, and that's also a design parameter to think about when you look at your projects. Is there in here a possibility to reach somebody that are being left behind? Can this project, can this planning activity, can this grown architecture that I'm working on, is there potential for providing protection, inclusivity, acknowledgement, systematic upgrade, stronger health, dignity, or the possibility to belong temporarily through this project for some of the people that are at risk of being left behind? And then I'm just showing on this slide also the Dakar Declaration, which is a summary of some of the possible actions by architects towards each goal. And with that, I'm going to thank very much for this opportunity to talk and finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I have to say that besides being the head of architecture school, an architect, and also an expert of sustainable development goals, Natalie is a mother to two adorable kids who are sitting here on the front row. I think that they are a little bit bored. So I will be very, very short with my question to you, which is, of course, the number 11 is where architects feel the most at home at, but you have seen lots of examples of architecture while doing your analysis. Which goal is the mostly overlooked by the architects and still needs more attention?
Well, that's a difficult question, because I think maybe one that's a little difficult for architects to see the architecture in is the one with life below water. But I think all of us know that we need to handle our wastewater. But to see how that become an architecture is maybe one of the more challenging goals.
And then the last question, viewing through all those examples, was there something that really surprised you in a positive way? Some revelations that you've done?
Well, I think what's so uplifting is that when you look across that map of the world, that so much fantastic architecture is actually contributing. That it's that the level, the quality of the architectural design in these examples is high. There's a lot of fantastic architectural achievements that are that has their quality of design not despite contributing, but through the contribution, and that's really something to be hopeful for. A slightly sort of less promising thing we notice across all these projects that we managed to identify is that that there are too few of the big-scale commercial projects that has an actual contribution. So I'll look forward to, in a few years, to see those projects coming as well.
Thank you very much, Natalie. So big applause for Natalie.